Hello everyone! So I'm back for another installment of Lattes and Literature, one of my favorite videos to film with you guys because I know a lot of you like to read too, and reading is my ultimate, bottom of the list of priorities thing to do that is also a real love of mine. I tend to read books that are quite light, so it's something that I do on vacation a lot and something that I do for maybe 15 minutes by the time I've done everything else I need to do, especially right now that I'm teaching and running my business and working full-time. It's not something that's been happening a lot, so it's taken me a while to read enough to put another one of these videos together. But then once I went for that weekend trip to Hawaii, I read 3 books in 3 days basically, which is crazy, but I am a really fast reader, so I really enjoyed kind of catching up with everything else that I had been kind of wanting to read but hadn't finished during that recent trip for my mom's birthday. So I'm here to tell you all about those books, so you are going to have quite the reading list after this. And something that I'm really excited about for this video as well is that it's not just regular fiction that I have to tell you about, not just novels, but also some different types of books as well. I've gone outside of my regular patterns for once. First of all, Liane Moriarty, pretty much my favorite modern author right now. Pure fiction, lots of drama, but really deep, very well-built characters that are very multidimensional and very different from each other as well. Definitely a bit of a suburban kind of background usually to the storyline, lots of moms, but I completely love that because I think it challenges the idea that people who live that sort of life are very one-dimensional in literature. I feel like that's something that you often see, but she really challenges that, and Truly Madly Guilty is no exception. So it starts off in a very kind of suburban, kind of pastoral Sydney neighborhood, and then things start to get dramatic, but it really takes a whole book until you figure out exactly what has happened. So if that's your kind of book where it's really actually the storyline itself that is in suspense, and you know that something has happened already, but then you are going back in time to find out what that was, you'll really enjoy this book. It's hot off the press, it just came out, it's been doing really well. Her books are going to be made into a series. I know Reese Witherspoon optioned the rights for one of them, and that's going to be coming out soon, so if everybody doesn't know her name now, they soon will. I first of all want to say a huge thank you to those of you who have recommended Harlan Coben to me. I, believe it or not, despite the fact that he's apparently one of the most prolific authors ever, some of his books have been made into movies, had never heard of him, and so I was so excited to just discover this enormously talented author. Liane Moriarty, her books are basically always set in Sydney, Australia suburbs. Harlan Coben writes all over the place. His books are set all over the world, mainly the US, but not always, and there's really no consistent pattern to his storyline other than that they are very suspenseful. They always have a lot of twists and turns, and I completely just fell off the deep end and have read so many of his books now because I just love the first one that I read was 6 Years. The suspense of that book was amazing. It was written from a male point of view, which I feel like is somewhat unusual in popular fiction because I feel like a lot of these types of books are geared at women, but it was just really a strong narrator. I feel like the plot was really good. Not every twist and turn in Harlan Coben books are super believable as the story kind of unfolds, but part of his talent is that while you are reading the book, it feels believable because it is just such strong writing. The sort of storyline itself is revealed just so masterfully. It's really only after you finish the book that you might look back and kind of feel a bit of a sense of disbelief that, all of these crazy things happen to an ordinary person, and, all these, murders happen, for example, in what seemed like just a very normal life. The character development is usually really strong. So some of my favorites, first of all, the first one I read was 6 Years, and I read a lot of online recommendations as well. I read all of yours, and then I wasn't sure which ones to pick because he has so many books and he's written for so many years. And it did say in an article, and I completely agree with this, that the first one you read will always be your favorite. So 6 Years was the first one that I read, and it probably was my favorite, except then I read Just One Look, and that one I feel like the character herself, who is a mother, maybe like because he's a male writing from a female point of view in that book, the character, the central character, was not quite as strongly developed. But the storyline for that book, especially that little twist in the last couple of pages, literally like blew my socks off. It completely took me by surprise. I'm usually always that person who kind of knows what's going to happen, especially in like lawyer crime movies or like, I don't know, some murder mysteries at least. Like I can guess, and it's kind of frustrating sometimes because I don't want to guess, but I had no idea, absolutely no idea that this twist was coming at the end, so I think you should read it so you can know the twist too. So that's Just One Look, and both Just One Look and 6 Years are some of his older ones, like not his super recent ones. Totally different characters, totally different stories, absolutely nothing in common other than that they're both very suspenseful. The only thing is I then read another 2 Harlan Cobens while I was on vacation in Hawaii, having read those 2 previous ones, and those were Long Lost and then Home. And Home is actually his most recent book, which is why I purchased it. It was kind of funny because Long Lost was in the library of our condo, like the public shared library, which is really great. I love discovering new things there. So I actually read that in paper format. It's one of the older ones, and it's actually one of his characters that repeats, so it's a Myron Bolitar novel. I'm not sure exactly how you say the character's name, but anyway, it's a bit more James Bond-esque, and I find the story even kind of a little bit less believable than some of the others. And basically Myron Bolitar and his friend are like 2 halves of James Bond, and it's more of a globe-trotting kind of glamorous storyline. I feel like if you like the Da Vinci Code, you know, where they kind of go and the story goes like all over the place, it's almost like a conspiracy theory kind of suspense. I didn't just love that as much, and maybe it's because Myron Bolitar, like, I don't know, I just didn't really feel for him and get attached to him like I did the protagonist in Just One Look and 6 Years, and because he ended up being in 2 of the novels that I read, I don't know, I didn't like them quite as much. Not to say that they weren't worth reading. And then my least favorite, for sure, so disappointing, was Coptown, which actually has great reviews by Karen Slaughter, and she is the author of Pretty Girls, which is the novel that I featured in my last Lattes in Literature. I was just so obsessed with that book, Pretty Girls. It is so disturbing. It is beyond R-rated. If you are sensitive to violence, then you should not read that book. But just the quality of the writing, to me, like, I didn't want to go to sleep until I had finished it. I didn't think about anything else for like the 3 days that it took me to finish that book. But Coptown, it was one of those books that just seemed to never end. It's not that the character development wasn't good, because it was. It had some interesting characters who were female police officers, written at a time where that was not the norm at all. So it was an interesting kind of sort of a research book, and it had a lot of interesting sort of storylines going on with that and the dynamics of being a female police officer. But the suspense side of the book I found really slow and just not good. Very violent as well, maybe not quite as much, but I just felt like the writing and the thriller element of it were really underdeveloped, and I guess her writing has just gotten so much better, because Coptown is definitely an older book of hers, whereas Pretty Girls is very recent. So I just kind of wanted to give you my 2 cents on that. Unfortunately, that was one that I really struggled to finish, and actually like slowed down my reading because I was really not into it at all, but I wanted to finish it because I kept being convinced that it would get better, which I don't really think that it did. I've also read 2 other books. One of them is more of a kind of self-help type book, and I just want to get into that because I loved that book so much. It's called The 5 Love Languages. It is so completely beyond my usual reading pattern. I don't like self-help books at all. It's just not my kind of thing, not the kind of thing that I enjoy or feel like I benefit from. But I had read so many good reviews. It was featured on the Cupcakes and Cashmere blog, and I really trust her judgment, and I don't know, I just had kind of seen it all over the place in magazine articles, and I thought the idea was really interesting. So it's the idea that everybody has a primary and secondary love language that they express love through, and it just kind of goes through different case studies that this psychologist, Dr. Chapman, has sort of observed, and through that he's kind of deduced that there are 5 love languages through which we express our love. Sounds so corny, I cannot do the whole thing justice, but I just thought it was so interesting, and it's a kind of book where you will read it and then kind of look back on previous relationships and identify things that maybe you hadn't seen before. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's going to change your life, because I feel like if you have a good relationship, those things will already be there. If you have a bad relationship, you will probably have struggled with those things, but it's just really well written. It's a really quick read, even if you're not into that whole kind of self-help or psychologist book kind of thing like me. I think it's definitely like worth a read and worth a share as well, just because it kind of really brings something different to the table, at least from my perspective. And just a couple of things that I really liked about the book were all the examples in it. I really liked the way he kind of made observations rather than judgments about people. I thought that was really just kind of well put together, very like non-judgmental book to read. Things that I liked less about the book but somehow didn't damage how worthwhile it was to me, but things that I liked less is it very much focuses on marriage, and I think for a lot of people you get past the infatuation stage well before you get to marriage nowadays. So it made a lot of assumptions that you would sort of be infatuated, get married, and then kind of be facing difficulties or like challenges, or be looking at a place of self-discovery and relationships thereafter, which I think is something that I would challenge nowadays, where most people do get to know each other quite a lot before that. So that's just kind of like something that was on my mind while I read it, but I didn't think that it stopped it in any way from being helpful or interesting or well written or anything like that. So yeah, I just really enjoyed that, and I don't know, it was fun to do something a little bit outside of my comfort zone. So if you have anything else like that, I'm not going to start reading like Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus or anything like that. It's just not my jam. But I am kind of wanting to be a little bit more open-minded, especially for this series. It's just fun to have some different things as well to bring to the table. And then the last book that I read, so overdue, I'm like the last person on the bandwagon for this book, is Girlboss by Sophie Amoruso. So famous. It's basically like a hashtag and a phenomenon now, not just a book anymore. If you don't know too much about her, she founded Nasty Gal with no outside investment at all. One of the most successful online retailers of all time. Still very successful. They started doing just vintage on eBay. It's her creation entirely, the company, pretty much. And so she started on eBay and then moved it basically into being a true kind of online clothing retailer that has just challenged a lot of assumptions about women in business and building a company, just in terms of the background that she had. And she didn't have a typical MBA sort of background or any traditional education on running a business, but much like me, she just figured it out as she went along. And yeah, I don't know, I really enjoyed that, just as a starting point. That idea that you could build something from the ground up is one that I really believe in, and I don't think that you need to have anything in particular under your belt. I think you just really need to have a desire to succeed and to do things well and to have good customer service, and those are all things that she outlines. So I really enjoyed the book. I feel like she's a good, really snappy writer. If you're not a quick reader, or you find, you know, a lot of books really long-winded, this is going to be such a quick, easy read for you. Whether or not you have an interest in starting a business, I think you would still enjoy it. Now, if you do have an interest in starting a business or you are in business, I also don't think that you will get a ton from the book other than just general motivation. It's kind of like an uplifting, just kind of fun, interesting, witty book about her story. So I don't think that you're going to get a lot of business tips. You're not going to really get a lot of insider kind of tips or anything like that on building a business successfully. I did think that there could have been a little bit more meat to it just in terms of how she wrote it. It tends to be a little bit more kind of backlash at assumptions about women in business and starting a business and everything else that people perceive, rather than kind of active helpfulness or active kind of stories that will help you to walk away with new things that you hadn't thought of. So I felt like there could have been a little bit more of that, but maybe it would have weighed down the book in more of a kind of business guide direction that she didn't want to go in. So that is it for all of the books that I've read over the last couple of months since I last filmed a Lattes and literature. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please let me know your reading recommendations down below. Clearly I do listen because I definitely listen to your request to see more variety, and also your recommendation of Harlan Coben I am so grateful for, because I'll still be reading more of his books. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really enjoyed filming this, and I will see you in my next installment. Bye!